Rangers fans, welcome to season 4 of Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast, sponsored by Believe. I'm Andrew Chelney. That's Nick Zararis. And Nick, the Rangers are 2-2 through 4 games, but the latest loss against the Caps was essentially how the Rangers won like every game last season with Shesterkin. Just pray to the goalie gods, hope you win, and they played well against the Caps. They just kind of got goalied.
So there's a lot to take away from 4 games. Last time we spoke, we'd only played 1 game, and 1 game a lot less than 4, and with every passing game, you have an opportunity to both learn something and for the team to improve, get worse, or trying to find what that equilibrium is. And right now, it still feels like the Rangers are in the very early stages of figuring out what this team is going to be, both in terms of style of play, who's going to play with who, and what's going to coax the best performances out of the guys that are on this team. And the metaphor I wrote down here in my notes and doing prep was very straightforward. The Rangers are trying to go from crawling to running over the course of this season. Right now, they've pushed themselves up on their hands and knees, and they're in these games. They played pretty well against Washington, even though they lost. They played pretty well against Pittsburgh and against Buffalo. And then on opening night, you lose 1-0 in a game where you didn't have a whole lot going for you. I know the final was 3-0, but when it was an actual game, they lost 1-0. There's stuff to take away from that. I think right now, so much of this is about just getting your feet under you and understanding who's going to play with who. Did anybody have Matthew Robertson drawing in this early on their card as far as
And by
things
the
to
way,
look out for?
he looked good.
He was fine. He was
Yeah,
passable. And when you're coming in a spot start capacity, and I would say the same thing for guys like Parsonen, who are going to be fighting Johnny Brodzinski, guys who are fighting to get into the lineup, you just want to not stick out. You don't want to
yeah,
stick out for bad reasons, because more likely than not, if you're coming in one of those spot start capacities, you're not going to be as dialed in, as locked in as you need. We're talking about the
sure.
team at large still needing to gel, find its footing, and play well together. And then we're asking guys who haven't played yet to jump in and to look good. So the fact that Robertson was able to play, didn't stick out like a sore thumb, that's a win. That's a really small win, but that's something in the grand scheme of a long season that matters, because now he knows, okay, even if I go back to the press box for a week or two, I played well enough that I feel good about my game. And the next time I get in there, I have a little bit more progress I've made since the last time I played. And that was my recurring theme on last week's show. Can we start to see signs of progress? Can guys get their feet under them and start to build outward? And I would venture to say, going from the game the way they did against Pittsburgh the first time to the second time is a clear understanding. Okay, this did not work. What do we need to do differently? How can we approach this? And there's going to be a lot of give and take here. There's going to be a lot of back and forth. There's going to be a lot of these guys trying to figure out what works. You lose Trocheck midway through one of the games, and he's going to be out week to week. Okay, so Zibanejad goes back to the middle. What does that do for the rest of our lineup? Well, that means top 6 Connor Sheary. Okay, well, what does that mean for our bottom 6 if Connor Sheary's in our top 6? And you start to piece together
Sure.
a foundation. And like you said, the way they played against Washington, and this is going to be my big point for this episode, so I'll just get it out of the way now. The way the Rangers are going to need to play with the talent they have, it's not going to be very easy to win. It just point blank, it is not going to be very easy to win hockey games relying on your defense being strong, relying on your goaltending being strong, and relying on situational offense and special teams to kind of make up the gap. This is kind of the inversion of what it's been in the past. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Part of the reason it worked so well for the Rangers against Washington, against Pittsburgh, against Buffalo, they weren't playing a lot of defense. They didn't get stuck in their own end for extended periods of time. They were able to break out, transition quickly. So they're going to have a hard time scoring, especially at 5-on-5. But we knew that coming into the year. That was going to be the deciding factor on what this team's ceiling was. But if this is the baseline style of play, if this is the energy, the intensity they're going to play with, that is going to be enough to keep them in most games and prevent a
Sure.
real fall off. Getting to that equilibrium, getting to that baseline.
I think the one interesting caveat to go back to Matthew Robertson for a second is he played more than Vakanainen,
Yeah.
which I think, it's just one game. It's a really small sample size, but it kind of highlights how Vakanainen is essentially a stopgap for this team right now. I think if Mike Sullivan and co trusted Vakanainen more, then that wouldn't have happened. I think if Vakanainen was a solidified like top 5 defenseman, then that would be the inverse of what actually happened. But because Vac, I saw this on the broadcast. I think at that time in the third period, Vac had like 13 minutes and Robertson played like 16 or 17 or whatever it was. That shows me that Mike Sullivan is watching Vakanainen just like we are and thinking, oh, like this guy doesn't really have it. Which it's a little bit of that. It's a little bit of, oh, Matthew Robertson is actually not playing badly. Let's reward him by giving him some more ice time. And it's a little bit of both. And I do see the writing on the wall here with Vakanainen at least a little bit. Again, it's one game. How much can you really read into one game? And there's situational stuff, and there's a lot of variables that can do it for sure. But that type of stuff doesn't usually happen. So it's interesting to point, to kind of highlight that and say, okay, let's see if that happens in the next game. If Robertson plays tonight against Edmonton, does that happen again? Does Vakanainen kind of get that 6 defenseman kind of rotating, kind of like, okay, maybe like in between type of role, and Robertson kind of gets the more prominent role again? If that becomes a trend, okay, well, is Robertson going to overtake Vakanainen's spot when Susie comes back, or maybe they bring up Scott Morrow or what? Like that. These are the little things that I'm starting to see from the ice time given by Mike Sullivan, and also Carter Sherry, for what it's worth. I mean, the PTO, and we were kind of meh about the signing, but I mean, he's looked good. He's looked, should he be playing a top 6 role? Probably not, but he's kind of forced into that role for the time being because Rangers kind of don't have anybody that can fill that spot, and well, especially with all their young guys being in the AHL. And he was serviceable. He was fine. He he's what, 5'8", but he doesn't play like it. Like he's somebody that provides energy when they need to be, and also he's the kind of guy that will go into the corners and fight for that puck in a time where the Rangers kind of don't have too many forwards that can do that well. Connor Sherry has proven that he can do that for his entire career, and the Rangers kind of needed somebody like that. So all in all, yeah, they're 2-2. The Penguins game was a 1-0 game, whatever kind of happens. And the game against Washington, yeah, Charlie Lindgren was amazing. The Rangers played really well. If they played like that every night, they're gonna win a bunch of games. I think that's the takeaway, at least for me, is this, at least that particular game was night and day compared to like 65 of the 82 games that we watched last season with this team. That was a really solid game. They had a number of great chances. Charlie Lindgren just stood on his head and won the game. It just happens. If they play like that, they're gonna make the playoffs.
And it's important because I was talking about this over the weekend with somebody about the Oilers, who had only played 2 games, but their Saturday game against the Canucks went a lot better than their Wednesday game against the Flames. And this point in the season, not a lot to take away on the macro. There's not a lot you can glean from only 4 games. But when you start playing with a certain style, a certain mentality, that's something that can be sticky, that can translate, that can carry over. And that's what I'm talking about when I say building that equilibrium, building a strong foundation, a baseline to operate from. Because if you're playing with that tenacity, with that intensity, you're not playing a lot of defense, you're going from defense to offense quickly, you're establishing offensive zone time, that's going to give you a really high floor. You're going to have a hard time scoring goals, and you can pass the puck to the perfect spot, and still sometimes it's not going to go in. Sometimes you just have guys who don't have it, and sometimes you're going to play a goalie that can rise to the occasion. But if you play that baseline where you're not giving up a lot, you're not creating a lot, you're giving yourselves opportunities, and you're falling back on your fundamentals, your baseline. And that is something that we have been clamoring for a long time. That the whole point of having systems, of having structures, is that guys operate within them so everybody knows what they need to be doing. Our sharpest and most harsh critiques of the Rangers over the last 2 seasons in particular have been the games where guys are freelancing, where it's, okay, we're losing, somebody needs to make a play. Okay, puck's on my stick, I got to make a play. No. When everybody starts going into business for themselves, it all falls apart. This is a team game. Even if you're a great player, you try and gain the zone with speed by yourself. Okay, that's great. Where's the help? Who are you passing to? Because as soon as you gain the zone with speed, slam on the brakes and wait, those those defensive players are going to come pressure you. They're going to make you move the puck. And all that work you did to get there isn't going to be there. So, in building that out, that is the essence of playing strong, structured hockey. I have the puck here. When I have the puck here, it needs to go there. That's the foundation of everything here. Part of the critique and the biggest problem with the Rangers transition game the last 2-3 years, I would even say 4 years, going back to the second year of Gerard Gallant, was the matter of fact that when they would win loose pucks in their own end, there wouldn't be anybody for the defenseman to pass the pucks to. The forwards would have already flown the zone. They're forcing a longer stretch pass than needs to be had. And it puts those defenders on islands where guys, other than Adam Fox in this group, none of those guys is going to hit that long first pass as well. Just flat out. Maybe Borgen can, maybe. Right now, I don't feel great about that long stretch pass. And yeah, is this going to be a bit of a lower ceiling offense because they don't really have the foot speed? They don't really have the guys who can cut to the middle, create dangerous offense dynamically. At least we haven't seen that from Panarin yet. Maybe as he gets more comfortable, he
Panarin's
only
clearly injured, by the way.
yeah, or or like we said last week, he's still kind of ramping up his conditioning from not playing in the preseason.
But a lot of
Either
like
or.
some of the decision making is like he's a little slow to things, and that maybe points to something's hurting him, something's bothering him. Which again, if something's bothering you, maybe don't play. But that's a fight that we're just never gonna win.
No, and when they're at this point in the season, and we talked about this last week, the idea if it's nagging and it's something that's going to bother you indefinitely, you probably are better off sitting 2 or 3 weeks now and
Right.
having an idea of what you'll need down the road, standings points wise, as opposed to trying to play through it all year. Because if you reach that tipping point where, okay, there's 15 games left and we're 8 points back of the last spot, you're going to be gutting it out at a really diminished state. But in that idea, in that macro idea about how they're playing and why that's important, this is going to keep them in a lot of games. When they're not putting their defenders on islands, their problems aren't as apparent. Their deficiencies as individual players aren't as apparent. When you're not asking Borgen to cover for partners, when you're not asking for Vakanainen to, when he does play, to do a whole lot, that's how you maximize guys. And we talk about this all the time. The idea, if you get to the NHL, you have to be able to do something well. There's got to be something in your toolbox. These players get into trouble when they are asked to do things they're not good at. When you ask guys to do stuff they can do, one short pass and we're out. That's workable. Win puck battles, get the puck to your more talented partner who can move the puck. Okay, that's workable. That's your goal right now in establishing how the Rangers are going to play the rest of this year going forward into the Mike Sullivan era. You want to put these guys in a position to succeed. Now, to your point about Connor Sheary, he's not a top 6 player in 2025, but his toolbox gives him a high enough floor that Mike Sullivan, and based on their previous experiences together, he feels comfortable enough that he will not actively tank that line by being a participant on it, by relying on his foot speed, by trying to win loose pucks, by forechecking. He can make himself somewhat useful, even if he doesn't necessarily have the scoring touch. And I do think that's ultimately going to be the question for this team, is where is the offense going to come from? Because at 5-on-5, this forward group, especially without Trocheck, is missing a top 6 forward, if not 2. And I'm happy Lafreniere picked up his first of the season. That was important for him to get his feet under him, start establishing where he wants to go. But for the Rangers this year, they are going to need guys to emerge to score enough, just flat out. And there's plenty of time for Othman, Perreault, Berard discourse. I think we'll probably get to that American Thanksgiving-ish if the offense continues to perform the way it is. But right now, I would dare to say that how the Rangers play is arguably more important than the actual results of the games. Because
I agree.
as Sunday was evidenced of, and like we talked about last week, we're trying to make progress right now. We're trying to go from crawling to standing on our own 2 feet to feeling, okay, we can hang around in most games because we play like this. How do we go from hanging around in a lot of these games to getting control of them? consistently having majority of possession, consistently having a majority of the dangerous scoring chances. Because then once we get to there, then we can start talking about, okay, they need this at the deadline, they need that at the deadline, or they need to promote this guy, or Lafreniere needs more minutes, or he needs to be on the first power play. Once you get to okay, we have tapped out the capacity of what we have right now, then we could start talking about how do we go from standing to walking to running. But
I
right now,
yeah.
progress. They are making progress.
I think the key takeaway, especially from that game against Washington, it was they looked more like a cohesive team in that game than they did for the vast majority of last season. They lost. Charlie Lindgren played an amazing game. Tip my hat to him. I think he saved like 3.5 goals above expected or some crazy number. He was insane. Stole the game. Rangers should have won the game for sure. They looked like a team that understood what they were supposed to do with the puck and without the puck. And for, I don't know, 60 games last season, you couldn't say that.
Nope.
And it's only been 4 games, and there's still going to be growing pains along the way, but you can already see the system that Mike Sullivan has implemented beginning to emerge, beginning to you're starting to see fundamental understanding of puck awareness, spatial awareness, play awareness, all of that. You are starting to see bits and pieces of it throughout the course of the game from players that last year you were like, this guy, what's going on? Where is he going? Why is he over there? Like you again, it's been 4 games, small sample size, but there's been a lot less of, oh my God, what is happening? Oh my God, where is he going? Oh my God, where is that puck going? Why is he pinching into this, going for this hit as opposed to actually playing the like there's been a lot less of that. And that is crucial as we move forward. Yeah, would you like to win the game against Washington? Sure. Would you like to win the game against Pittsburgh? Sure. But fundamentally, you are starting to see a team that is playing like a professional hockey team, which, at times last season, you would watch the Rangers and you would go, oh my, like, what is going on the ice right now? Is there a plan, or are we is this a free skate? Like it felt like that at times because of how discombobulated everybody seemed to be whenever the puck was in play. Through 4 games, there has been a lot less of that. And that kind of gives me hope where, okay, if you're building the foundation now, and sure, you're 2-2, there's 78 games left, you're going to win more games, especially if you play like you did against Washington. You're building the foundation now so that come January, come February, come the latter half of the season where, it's playoff push time and you got to get there, you are building on that strong foundation. And through 4 games, I like what I'm seeing from this team.
And part of why that's important to do now, and why I think it's important they get the style and how they want to play down early, is it'll help foster confidence for a lot of guys. And we talked about that a lot last year, especially November to December when they were in that tailspin. Because as you alluded to, they looked like they'd never played together before last year. There were points where, as I had said earlier, it was 5 skaters out there, everybody in business for themselves. Not a whole lot of, okay, I have this outlet pass, I have that outlet pass. It's, we're losing this game. My hair is on fire. I need to do something right now.
We're
Or
losing
I'm going
recipes,
to die.
Nick.
Yeah, and that's what happened last year. They absolutely capitulated. And that's the problem in any type of people management. That's not unique to sports. When it falls apart and there's nobody there to reassemble it, you need to build these guys back up. That's why we heard all summer, well, Mike Sullivan went to Sweden. He spent 2 days with Mika Zibanejad and his family. They talked extensively about what it was going to take to coax the best performance out of him. And he wants to play with JT Miller. Okay, we'll do that. We're going to do whatever we can to try and build him up, to try and help get his confidence going. And I think fundamentally, if you get to this baseline of style, this main idea of how they're going to play, they can unlock a lot of what is going to build these guys to where they need to be.
And by the way, speaking of Zibanejad, really quickly, he's shooting the puck this season,
Yeah.
which is A nice surprise.
It'd be nice if it went in, but baby
Hey, listen,
steps,
listen,
baby
listen. Hey,
steps.
hey, Nick. One step at a time here. Hold on, hold on. He's shooting the puck, which is more than what we could have said for the vast majority of last season. So at least he when he has the puck on his stick in the offensive zone, he's looking to get it on net, which is a big improvement over what we saw last season.
That's really all we're asking for. Because, like, I know what Mika Zibanejad is at this point. He's a C minus version of what Steven Stamkos was in 2023, where he still got the shot, but it doesn't really have the same pop. I made the metaphor of a pop gun, where it still kind of explodes off the stick, but it's not nearly as hard as it used to be. It's not on net nearly as much as it used to be. His defense is definitely not nearly as good as what it once was. But right now, for Zibanejad, in particular Zibanejad, I would say Lafreniere as well, because we saw what happened last year when the confidence started to dissipate. He was disengaged. He wasn't doing as much as he needed to. And I talked about this a couple days ago with somebody about Panarin. We were talking about whether it made sense to bring him back next year or not. I think Panarin is a really strong bellwether for how things are going. And we talked about that a lot, the idea that this is a whole team of conduits. They have no conductors. Nobody really gets them going. But Panarin's total disengagement from anything resembling defense last year, that's kind of infectious. That kind of trickled down to everybody on varying degrees. And when it's going good, like it was 2 years ago, where him, Trocheck, and Lafreniere were one of the best lines in all of hockey, it's fine. But when it falls apart the way it did last year, everybody looks around and says, that guy's the most expensive player on this team. He doesn't care. Why should I? And nobody consciously says that or thinks that to themselves. But we know how psychology works. You see people at work doing a phone it in job, and suddenly, well, do I really need to return this email right now? Do I need to make this call right now? No, I think I'll scroll on my phone for a few minutes. I think I'll get another cup of coffee. I think I'll go to the bathroom. It's very infectious, and it starts with leadership. Now, starting from scratch, and I should give this illusion, I wanted to say this earlier, this is one of the benefits of having a new coach. And you had said it before, talking about Robertson getting preferential play over Vakanainen the other night. That's the benefit of having a new coach, is a fresh set of eyes on the situation, somebody who is starting blankly with all of these people, who can look at this situation objectively and say, this is what we need to do. This is how we're going to get there. And if you're not on board with doing this, we're going to take care of that. You're not going to play. And look, we know that certain obligations need to be met. They're not going to healthy scratch Zibanejad or Panarin or Trocheck when he's healthy. Probably not Lafreniere. They're not going to healthy scratch Gavrikov. They might healthy scratch Susi, but they're not going to healthy scratch Borgen. There is a pecking order. There is an established hierarchy here. The problem becomes when it becomes illegitimate the way it was last year. We always go back to that Capo Caco quote of, I might not be playing well, but I am not the worst player on this team. And he was right to say that. He was fundamentally right to say that. You need to establish credibility, especially with the younger guys. And whenever Othman, Berard, Perot get a chance, I would say Edstrom and Rempe have taken a nice start to the season so far for sure. They are bought into what they need to be doing. Granted, they have the easiest job imaginable, but they have their job and they're doing it well. Now, where else can we say, okay, here is an opportunity. Go out there and do your job. To your point, Zibanejad's letting it fly. He clearly feels okay about his game right now. Now think about what's going to happen the first 2 or 3 goals he gets, if he can get it in short order, to really get it going, really get that spark and get his feet under him. Because I remember there was an episode we did, I want to say it was November or December of last year, when they were in the midst of that losing streak. And we were making the case, send Zibanejad home for a week. He's unplayable right now. He is out of position defensively. He cannot receive a pass cleanly without losing the puck. And his passes are off. He just does not look right. You need to give him a reset. For a guy like that, who so clearly needs his confidence to be going right, to play well, they are doing what they can. Now, they do need his pucks to start going in the net eventually, so it doesn't boil over into a sense of frustration. But you can talk yourself into this right now. You can talk yourself into this version of the Rangers that are hardworking. They move the puck pretty well. They don't score a lot, but they're going to hang around. They're going to be annoying to play against to some degree, and they're finding their way. That's enticing. That, like I said a few weeks ago, give me a reason to care. Okay, guys trying to reinvent themselves, that's
Yeah.
a reason to care. The young guys taking steps, that's a reason to care.
Lapas look good.
Yeah.
Cooley's look good. You know, like the and Robertson, like we talked about, didn't look bad
No.
in that game.
And that's
Like,
enough. That's
yeah,
enough.
that's already something,
Yeah.
right? It's the guys that are supposed to be there are performing at a higher level than we saw last year, which again isn't really saying a whole lot considering gestures wildly at last season, but it's you still got to get there, right? It's one thing to understand that, oh, last season was a debacle of all debacles, but it's another thing to be like, okay, last season was really bad. Now let's actually take steps in order to improve that. And so far through 4 games, it looks like they have. So that like that's still good. That's still progress towards what we want to see out of them. So they got a pretty busy schedule coming up with Edmonton and Toronto and Montreal. They're going through half of, well, you can't have all Canadian teams right now, but they got 3 Canadian teams in a row. Then they're back home for 2 games. I mean, they look really good against Buffalo. Buffalo, by the way, oh my god, oh my god,
Is it good when the fans show up with paper bags, third game of the season?
they got booed in their season opener off the ice. Oh my god, oh
Well,
boy. But yeah, then they got the rematch against Pittsburgh, and then they dumpstered that in them in the rematch. So it's just a lot of positive signs, and that I think you can really be hopeful about because it's only been 4 games, and yet there's a lot of positive signs already coming out, and that I think is one of the key points to the early few games of the season. It'd be one thing if they were floundering like the Rangers were in 2014 when Ave took over for 2 months, where they were a dumpster fire, and then they figured out they won all the games after that. But through 4 games, it does seem like a lot of the issues that were plaguing that last year's team, I don't want to say it's been like fixed forever, but you don't see nearly as many of the issues that we saw, and that's a positive sign. And I want to highlight a comment here off YouTube at the Legend 21D who said they look better every game. Got to be happy with the growth, and I think that is a great summary of what we're talking about. It is really, they went from last season's is this a hockey team to, oh, they're a hockey team and they're actually playing pretty well, like that through 4 games. Again, like I can't stress this enough, through 4 games is a big development, and hopefully this continues.
and that's all you can ask for. As a fan, there are certain things that are reasonable. Some fan bases go into the year with, okay, they need to win the Stanley Cup or the years of failure. You can have that mentality, and that's fine. That's your prerogative as a fan. For me, at this point in my life, knowing what I know about the teams I root for, I know that's an unrealistic expectation most of the time. I know that when everything is in alignment, that it takes an unbelievable amount of luck to win 4 best-of-7 series after winning the 47 to 55 regular season games it'll take to get there to begin with. I can talk myself into, okay, this team has been counted out. It has been written off. It has been left for dead. Their best forward is an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. There are no marquee free agents there next July 1st. Maybe Jason Robertson is a restricted free agent, but that's a different conversation. Maybe Tage Thompson, Rasmus Dahlin, different conversation. But for right now, you can sell me on this is a team everybody has written off that has a coach that has won 2 Stanley Cups and has been written off. And that marriage of veterans who are established but kind of have varying degrees of reputations. Panarin, Zibanejad have reputations as not being the most clutch of postseason players. JT Miller has a reputation for being a bit difficult to deal with. Lafreniere has a reputation for maybe being a
By
bit
the way,
overhyped.
I saw a tweet, I think it was last night, that Elias Pettersson would benefit from having some time in Abbotsford, and
Well, it could have
oh,
been the defenseman Elias Pettersson
no,
or the
no,
other Elias Pettersson.
I think he was talking about EP40 because he wrote EP40. I'm if I remember correctly in the tweet. Like, and oh, but that was all JT Miller's fault. So, anyways, carry on.
But that's the larger point here. If you want to sell me on something, and it's reasonable that you could sell me on this take, this pitch I'm giving right now, that's something worth investing your time in. Because last year's team gave up. And yes, they went out there. Yes, they put the jerseys on. They laced up the skates. But for 3 months, well, if we want to make the playoffs, we need to play better. If we want to make the playoffs, we need to play better. They've already done more growth this year than they did last year, and they have played all of 4 games. That is encouraging. That is a sign of a team that understands the task before them. Now, there's work to be done. There are going to be players who are going to rotate in and out. That is just the nature of a regular season. It's why getting excited or dismayed about the state of a roster the first week of October, first month of the season, is a little bit silly. Was I enthusiastic Connor Sheary made the team, that he's in the top 6? No, I would rather that be Perot or Othman or Brett Berard, somebody who has a lot of runway going forward into their NHL career. Because you know what Connor Sheary is at this point. He is a defined entity, but at the very least, you have something to get novelly invested in, because those guys are coming. You mentioned Morrow before. He's going to get a look at some point this year. That's something to care about. And real quick, I did want to say this too. Quick looked good, which was a nice refreshment
Yeah.
on Sunday night. And look, there's nothing you can do on the Beauvillier goal. That's just hockey. Sometimes you're going to get a bad roll of the dice. It happens. But if Quick can give them, 900 goaltending as a backup this year, that's perfectly adequate. That's all we need from the Jonathan Quick last dance season. The Rangers have enough here for you to care, for you to be invested in. Now it's incumbent upon them to recognize where there are areas for growth, because then we can start talking about promotions, call-ups, and trades. Keep finding your next area of improvement and go from there. The power play has to get going. It just does. Will it? We're going to find out. That's why we play the games. But that would,
their
for
penalty
me,
kill, by the way, is real good.
yeah, the
Real
kill
good.
has been good.
Yeah.
And having fresh legs, having the thing that helps with that is they have a lot of guys who can do it. That
Yeah.
when you can constantly cycle, when you could get 4 pairs of forwards over the wall and they all play 30 to 40 seconds, you're able to keep up your intensity when you're pressuring. That goes a long way in the span of a season. But for me right now, my biggest identity point and my biggest, okay, where do we get this better, is the power play. Because they're getting decent looks. It's not that they're not getting the looks. It's they need that first one to go in so everyone can exhale and go from there. I know there is a lot of talent and you run into the too many cooks in the kitchen situation. But at a certain point, somebody in that cohort just needs to make a play. And it really is that simple sometimes when we're talking about special teams, where it's one guy making an isolated play just to get some momentum. And like we talked about, the biggest difference last year for the power play year over year from the year prior is Chris Kreider's net front game was non-existent. And they need to understand what life on the power play is like post Chris Kreider at the net front. That might take a while to figure out.
Sure.
But if this is the baseline at 5-on-5, they will have time and they will have earned the opportunity to figure out how they need to improve the power play.
Yeah, and we've already seen some experimentation. You saw the JT Miller tip goal in front of the net. You've seen the Matt Rempe tree just essentially being the Chara that the Bruins tried, a couple decades ago, with just planting him in front of the net and just making sure that the goalie sees absolutely nothing, and seeing what happens after that. We're seeing that's another thing that I like about Mike Sullivan as of October 14th is he's trying things, which is something that we haven't really been seeing from a lot of head coaches here lately. He's experimenting. He's not having one thing and then running that into the ground for like 4 months, and then after a a a, a treasure trove of data to suggest that doesn't work, he's like, oh. Wait, this actually doesn't work. Maybe I should try something else. Mike Sullivan is actively experimenting. He's actively trying to find different pairings, different systems, different combinations that work for this roster, and I would have to think that he's going to keep doing that as the season goes along. But I'm liking it. I'm liking the open-mindedness to say, okay, this could be better. Let me try something else. And that is a line of thinking that, again, we haven't really seen from a lot of the head coaches that have gone through the Rangers the last few years. And that is another thing that kind of gives me hope for the future of this team. Throughout the duration, at least, of Mike Sullivan's contract is okay. Well, he's not super set on every decision that he makes. Through 4 games, he's been open to, okay, let me try this, let me try that. And that is something that I want to see more of. And I'm really happy to see that from Mike Sullivan. I hope he continues that.
All you can ask for. And that was one of the big critiques of last year when they were absolutely floundering, was the unwillingness to change anything. It was, nope, everybody's got to play with everybody. This is who everybody's friends with. They got to play with who they're friends with. And that was the end of the conversation. And look, it's been 4 games. They could go out there tonight and Edmonton could hang a 5 spot on them, and we could look pretty stupid having this conversation right now. That's just the nature of professional sports,
Sure.
especially in a long season. You know, it is hard to make broad, sweeping declarations, especially about results, because Ed, we talk about this all the time. Process does not necessarily equal good results. And that's one of the last real keys here. If the Rangers can maintain a reasonable process and perform at a baseline where we're not too high, we're not too low, just most nights we're going to go out there, we're going to be in the game, we're going to control the puck, we're going to minimize the chances Igor has to make saves on. So the handful of dangerous ones he does have to make, he is more inclined, he has more capacity to make them because we're not wearing him too thin. That is a workable plan while the Stars figure it out, especially at 5-on-5, and while the power play gets ironed out. There is plenty to like so far, but it is also okay to acknowledge there is work to be done. It is both at the
Sure.
same time, and that's the mentality you need to have. It's not just enough that, okay, they're not a laughing stock. That's good. Well, they shouldn't be a laughing stock. Now we're trying to go to, okay, they're scrappy, they play really hard, they hang around. Okay, how do we go from that to, damn, they're pretty good? That's your goal for the next 4.5 months. Because if you stay where you are right now, and there's no shame in that, you know, being the second one of the 2 wild cards, transition year, figuring out what the next version of the team's going to look like, there's no shame in that. You know, that's basically what we anticipated this team to be going into the season, that they're probably a wild card team unless something breaks right for them. Then maybe they can sneak into the 3rd spot in the Metro. Okay. If you get there, how'd you get there? Did you give younger guys an opportunity to grow, to get better? Did you rely on the older established guys just to get you there? And I think that's going to ultimately define how good they can be. Because a lot of these veterans, we know what they are. Can you find ways to get more out of them? Or are you going to import guys who you don't know what they are? And they could be anything from really good to really bad. That's really where your opportunities for growth are because they're such a veteran heavy team.
The idea that, we talked about this throughout the off season, and it can't possibly go as bad, surely, right? And early on, there are signs of that not only not happening, but okay, like there's genuine positive movement in the direction to back towards, like you said, positive regression. Like that's the idea of, okay, well, we were on this side of the fence where like every bad thing ever that could possibly happen on the ice was happening for 65 of the 82 games last season, to give or take, or whatever it was. And now we're coming back. Everyone's coming back. We're coming back towards the middle, and maybe even going the other way of, okay, well, now we're controlling the puck a little bit more. We're dictating the pace of play. We're not giving up 7 2-on-1s every game and making Shesterkin have to do the splits 75,000 times in a course of a 60-minute hockey game, which is going to add to his wear and tear, right? Like there are things in place through these 4 games that really make me think, okay, this is sustainable. And that's the key here to all of this is, yeah, you're not going to win every game, and sometimes you're going to get goal lead and whatever things happen. But the key to the Rangers this season is, can you play like you did against Washington against everybody else? That you have to sustain that level of play. And by all accounts, I mean, if they played like that against Washington with that roster, with Connor sharing the top 6, then I would have to think that it is sustainable, that this team has what it takes to do that. Now it's up to them to I guess, prove me right in the situation, but they have 78 more games to play. But early on, there's signs of hope. There's signs of life. There's signs of, okay, wait, maybe we can get this ball rolling. Maybe we can play like this throughout the course of the season. and that's a positive. And that's, it. My view right now through 4 games is a lot more positive than what it was even before the season started.
Okay, real quick, I wanted to get this joke off because the lead is just preposterous. Okay. Every kid in Western Pennsylvania either wants to be Crosby, Trocheck, or Miller. I don't know about that one. I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say I know JT Miller and Vincent Trocheck are from Western Pennsylvania. They're pretty good hockey players. They've represented the United States internationally. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, even if you're not a Crosby guy, you're probably a Malkin guy, maybe a Letang guy, Marc-Andre Fleury. Maybe you're a gal. Maybe you're a Evgeny Malkin gal.
Sure.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Vincent Trocheck, who has spent the majority of his career in Carolina and Florida, not really moving the needle in Western Pennsylvania. And JT Miller, Tampa, Vancouver, the Rangers, playing for rivals of Pittsburgh. Like, it'd be one thing if, I was talking about a player from my hometown who was on the Canucks. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Vincent Trocheck's not really moving the needle in Western Pennsylvania. Is there, then again, the one caveat I will give, if there's a hockey rink that has been named because of donations, okay, fine, whatever. We're poking in good fun.
Sure.
But let's be
maybe
serious.
maybe Trocheck and Miller are like during the summers are just there all the time giving out, doing clinics and doing stuff like that. Then we can have a conversation. But yeah, like I don't know whomst in the NHL is born in New York. I don't know. All I know is do they play for the Rangers?
Trevor Zegras? No, he's Connecticut. Sonny Milano, he's Long Island.
He was a Rangers fan though. Adam Fox, New Yorker.
Yeah. All right. The Rangers play Edmonton tonight. This will be a good, I won't even say bellwether, because Edmonton also has kind of a Frankenstein lineup right now where they have 3 third lines.
Jack Roslovic is making his season debut. Place your bets, everybody, because he's going to score against his former team. That's how it works. I think I saw a tweet that had him at plus 500. I mean, that's free money. Please.
I'm going to pull that up real quick.
Not an ad. Don't do but
gamble responsibly.
Yeah. Bet responsibly. We're not sponsored by a book. Do whatever you want with your money. This is not, not advice. He's plus 500. That's pretty good. I would take a look at that.
FanDuel has him at plus 500, so I might have to dip the beat.
Not sponsored by FanDuel, but
no.
Yeah.
All right, that'll do it for this week's edition of Liberty Blue. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please throw the show a 5-star review. Andrew and I will talk to you guys next week, where I'm certain